Firstly, I want to take a moment to say that I am so proud of you for clicking on this video. Mental health issues and healing can be completely life-consuming, and wanting to take the reins back on your life and your mental health again takes real grit and strength, and I am so proud of you for that. In this video, I'm going to take you through some of my advice and first-hand experience for finding and choosing a therapist that is right for you, and guide you through what can be an incredibly overwhelming process. Disclaimer, I am not a medical professional, I am just a person who wants to make the process of finding and choosing a therapist easier for people who are struggling to start. I have bipolar disorder, ADHD, and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and I've been in therapy for the last 2 years consistently. It has absolutely changed my life, and I really want it to be able to change yours as well. This video is going to have a lot of information in it. I will try and make it as digestible as possible, and in the description I will have timestamps for everything, so that if you need to jump back a few times, you can do that. Step 1 is accepting that you need professional support. Admitting you need help is so scary for so many reasons. Maybe you're living in a state of hyper-independence where you genuinely think all will be fine and you can just muddle through without going to therapy. It can come with feelings of guilt and whether you have it bad enough compared to other people. Maybe you've had awful past experiences and the thought of going back and it not working again is just genuinely horrendous for you. So many reasons could stop you seeking help and support, and all of the ones that I've listed are all reasons why I delayed seeking support and struggled for so long without the support that I so desperately needed. Accepting you need help and support can also help you not resent or resist any advice or guidance you might get from a therapist when you do start seeing one. This process can take a while, but I believe that being open to being supported is the best way for you to feel hopeful and optimistic that when you do start to see a therapist, you'll start to see things improving. Step 2, should you access therapy through a health service or privately? This one is tricky. I personally have had quite bad experiences with the National Health Service in the UK. I've had some pretty traumatic experiences, to be honest, and this is due to underfunding from the government, and the system has failed me and has failed a lot of other people as well. However, for so many others, it has saved their life, given them access to care plans and care teams and free accessible services, so it's super tricky when trying to weigh these up. In terms of the pros and the cons for both, for the National Health Service or health services, the pros are that they offer free services, they're accessible for everyone, there is a lower cost for regular prescriptions if you need medication, and depending on the severity of your mental health condition, you could eventually have a care team behind you, which means you have multiple people that you can turn to for support and guidance. The cons are that waiting lists are so long, sometimes up to or over 2 years, depending on the type of therapy that you need. You can't generally choose the therapist or psychiatrist that you see, and often you are passed between departments and people, which can be quite traumatic if you're repeatedly having to unload trauma and can disrupt your quality of care. For private therapy, the pros are that you can see someone much sooner depending on therapist availability. You could be able to book in with someone next day or even just a few days away. You can choose the therapist and type of therapy you receive, and you can usually stay on a rolling basis with therapists for as long as you need to, which can drastically improve your comfort and quality of care if you do need to see someone for a long time. In terms of the cons, the huge one is cost. Private therapy is a massive expense and a big financial commitment. Also, a lot of referrals for diagnosis or medication will still have to go back through the NHS, or you'll have to pay for them privately, meaning either way, waiting times or extra cost will be inevitable. And if your mental health condition requires further support alongside therapy, either of these happening is pretty much guaranteed. In terms of which one to choose, I know I am biased, but private therapy has literally saved my life. I think there is no more worthwhile investment than your health and your life, which is why I would strongly recommend private therapy if it is viable for you. The main barrier people usually have with private therapy is the cost and financial commitment, and I'll have some more tips on this later in the video. I'll be focusing on the private therapy route for the rest of this video because I really feel like it is the option that can give you the most hope and help you feel like you have a shorter term, more tangible solution for being able to access support and treatment. In my experience, when I was at capacity and couldn't cope anymore, and I was staring down the barrel of a 2 to 3 year waiting list for support, it felt genuinely impossible. Your life and your health is the most valuable thing, and I think it is the most worthwhile investment you could ever make. Step 3 is choosing a private therapy service or platform. If you are overwhelmed and just want a friend of friend recommendation, I use Harley Therapy and I've had the most amazing experience there. I was completely overwhelmed by options when I started looking for a therapist, and I was recommended Harley Therapy by a friend, and I went on there and everything just seemed to work. If you do want to try a different platform, make sure the platform is accredited. I think this is usually done by a medical association. Make sure it's somewhere that vets their therapists before hiring them and putting them onto the service. And read reviews, etc. online and perspectives from people that that have actually used the service to kind of gain a feel for the quality of service and how helpful it's been for people. If anyone watching this has used a service or platform that they love, please put it in the comments down below. The more options for the good and lovely people out there, the better. And especially if Harley therapy doesn't work for you, or you're based outside the UK and maybe you want someone close to your time zone, the more options we have, the better. Step 4 is choosing a type of therapy. This is the most overwhelming part that is just not spoken about. There are so many types of therapy. Once you leave the counseling and CBT base options of health services, you go onto Google and you type in therapy and it comes up with 85 different types of therapy, and it's completely overwhelming. And the first time I did this, I wasn't aware of this. It completely scared me away because the influx of information was so intense and I was already at capacity. It just felt like way too much to process and choose. My biggest advice and the best advice that was given to me is if you are overwhelmed or you are unsure what type of therapy you will benefit from, search for integrative therapists. Integrative therapists are specialists in multiple types of therapy, and they are trained to figure out what type of therapy you might respond best to when speaking to you. This can make the initial process of speaking to someone for the first time so much easier if you're not wondering the whole time you're speaking to them if this type of therapy is even going to work for you. I had no idea what type of therapy I needed. I just knew that I needed help and I needed support, and I felt like I needed it very urgently. Speaking to an integrative therapist allowed me to just be myself in the sessions and allow the professional to figure out what I needed. I'm a talker. I figure out the mess inside my head through speaking things aloud. I actually found out, I think this is called verbal patterning, and it's very common in neurodiverse people, so that makes a lot of sense. My therapist hooked onto this so quickly, and within a few sessions I was comfortable enough to speak about things that I'd never told to anybody else or admitted to myself. If it's not your first go at therapy, or you think a specific type of therapy might be the best for you but you're not quite sure, consider the type of person you are and how you process things in day-to-day life. For example, if you can speak about your difficulties and find that you can speak through things with long conversations, some form of talking-based therapy might be a good option for you. Or if you feel like you need to get out of your head and maybe work more in your subconscious thoughts, something like hypnotherapy could be really beneficial for you. If you have the capacity, do some light research or look at some of the therapist profiles to maybe see some of the different types of therapy and see which one might be a good fit for you. Most therapists are trained in a lot of different styles of therapy, meaning you could start one approach with a therapist, but then start responding better to a different approach, in which case they can switch up your approach and switch up the style of therapy you're receiving without you having to break your continuity of care, speak to a new therapist, etc. Step 5 is choosing the therapist. The easiest comparison I can make to this is to think of therapist profiles like dating profiles. You want someone that sounds like a good match for you. You might not hit it off straight away, and you might just be a better fit with somebody else. My advice would be to write a list of all the things your dream therapist would be, and then look for those qualities in therapist bios or through the search filter on the platform you're looking at therapists on. For example, my therapist is queer, they have lived experience being a part of the LGBTQIA+ community. I'm so glad I got that right first time. And they specialize in queer therapy, trauma, and shame work, which were all massive factors in me choosing them. Do you want someone that has shared lived experience with you? Do you want them to be a similar age to you? Do you want them to be older than you? Do you want them to be younger than you? Do you want them to be male identifying, female identifying, non-binary, a person of colour, sexuality, gay, queer, etc.? These are all things to think about, and I find there is a real ease when speaking to people that have the same lived experiences as you. You don't have to have lived parallel lives with them and be all in the same communities, but I do feel like this can really help you click with someone and form some kind of unspoken trust and bond. Also, look at what the therapist specialises in. They usually specialise in a multitude of things, but if you are struggling with something specific such as an anxiety disorder, an eating disorder, a panic disorder, family trauma, relationship trauma, self-confidence, you can usually categorise your search on the platforms for these things and try and match yourself with therapists who are specialists in the areas you want help with. Next up is look at what type of sessions the therapist offers. These could be in-person appointments, Zoom appointments, phone appointments. Think about which one might be the best fit for you and look for therapists that offer these types of sessions. For example, all my sessions are on video call. I hate using the phone, really hate using the phone, and I also live in a city, which means if I'm going somewhere to unload my trauma, the last thing I want to do is get on the tube straight afterwards to get home. Video calls work perfectly for me, and I don't have to leave my bed for sessions, which is just the dream. This one is sometimes the deal breaker, but have a look at the cost of the sessions for each therapist. In general, I found that in-person appointments and also therapists that are based near a city, for example London, tend to be a little bit more expensive, and virtual Zoom and phone appointments tend to be slightly cheaper. However, the main factor here is absolutely how the therapists individually price their sessions, and this is usually based on the years of experience they have, the years that they've practiced, or sometimes the complexity of the therapy that they offer. However, if cost is really the deal breaker for you and feels like the final wall between you and being able to access therapy, some therapists do offer sliding scales for price for those that are struggling with finances or where their financial situation is affecting their mental health. However, this really depends on the therapists. Some therapists don't offer it at all, and some of them don't advertise it in order for people to not take advantage of it by lying about their income before the sessions. It may be good to inquire and ask if a sliding price scale is available for therapists you like the look of. Even if that means you pay full price for the sessions for a while, with the hope and future plan that at some point they can scale down price-wise and you'll be able to have the sessions more frequently. My final note for this section is that finding a therapist really can be like dating. Sometimes you just won't click with someone, and that is completely okay. This experience in itself can be super overwhelming, and my advice for this is to just take some time to regroup, prepare yourself for other primary or chemistry sessions with therapists, and just keep on trying until you find someone you're a good fit with. You don't need to feel like their best friend straight away or feel completely comfortable straight away, but if you have a glimmer of comfort with someone and can see yourself being able to open up with them, that is enough to build a relationship with the therapist and eventually be able to disclose the really personal things that you haven't been able to tell to anybody or maybe haven't actually realized yourself yet. The right therapist can help or save your life, and I really think it's worth taking the time to really find someone that is a really good fit for you. In doing this, you can get the most out of therapy, with the support, and also financially, and just generally feel like the whole experience is much more positive, much more hopeful, and you somewhat look forward to the sessions because you know how much good they can bring into your life. I know I said this was a 5-step system, but I'm a talker and I have some other notes and top tips from some lived experience from your boy to try and make this a little bit easier for you. When you are on the therapist profiles and kind of in the final stage of approaching therapists, ask a friend or a loved one for second opinions, or more importantly, ask if they can sit with you while you're looking at therapy options and therapists. Primary sessions can require you to fill out a form with your current circumstances and what's going on for you, and that in itself can be really difficult and quite triggering, especially when you're speaking about unhealed trauma or your current life situations that are really pressing on you. I remember when I filled out this form and I wasn't really myself for a couple of days afterwards because a lot of these things I hadn't really addressed before, and I had to type out my whole mental health history to a stranger, which was a lot, and no one warned me about that part. Didn't realize that I was gonna have to do it. This is me telling you from my first-hand experience that for primary sessions, there's usually a form you need to fill out with your current circumstances. My advice for this is just to take it really slow, and if it is too much one day, come back to it, because you're already showing up for yourself so much by wanting to seek therapy and wanting to seek support. Even briefly outlining the vague area of your life or mental health that you're struggling with can help the therapist prepare for your primary session and ultimately hold the safest space for you to be able to eventually feel comfortable enough speaking about it. If you are really apprehensive about starting therapy, it's really scary and a really overwhelming thing, or you don't know anybody else that started, or you just feel quite alone in the process, my favourite place, I really love Reddit. I think at this point I just mention it in every single video at some point, but I find that Reddit is really good for seeing lived experiences, and you can see the truthful accounts of people going to therapy, for example, timelines of how long it took for them to see things getting better, if it got worse before it got better, which can happen to some people, it happened to me, and just seeing some truthful accounts on the therapy process itself so you can be more prepared for it and not have too many surprises along the way. And my biggest tip for anyone that is wanting to find or choose a therapist is be willing to put the work in outside of your sessions. Therapy is like going into a toolbox and picking up the tools to deal with whatever is going on in your life. If you pick up the tool from the toolbox but never actually use it, you're not going to see as much progress compared to if you pick up that tool and try to use it even if you have no clue what you're doing with it at the start. My therapist has really graciously reminded me a lot of times in my sessions that the reason I've made so much progress is because I put in the work. And it's true, my therapy sessions are a drop-in, 1 hour a week, 1 hour every 2 weeks, 1 hour every 3 to 4 weeks, depending on my finances. But the things I learn in therapy, I try to enact everywhere because it's my life. If I went to a singing lesson once a month and only sang for that 1 hour every month, I only have 1 hour of practice. If I wanted to start hula hooping and I only hula hooped for an hour a month, I will only improve an hour a month every month at hula hooping. I firmly believe you really do get out what you put in, and your therapist is there to guide you, but just turning up to therapy won't fix everything. So yeah, think of it like the toolbox. If you leave the tools in the toolbox, they're not going to be as useful as if you pick them up and try to use them a little bit. On a personal note, I am so passionate about this because therapy and finding the right therapist for me genuinely saved my life last year. Ooh, I'm gonna get emotional. My therapist helped me last year while I was being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, while I was being diagnosed with ADHD, and it is because of my therapist that I didn't have to end up going into a psychiatric ward while I was in crisis. I owe my therapist and therapy in general for my life and still being here today. And therapy has helped me find the light in my life that I had lost for so long and in some areas never had. My therapist also supported me while I had to seek psychiatric support and while I had to see psychiatrists, and this was so helpful for me when other medical professionals had failed me in the past and I felt really alone in my struggles. You have to put the work in outside of sessions and really hold yourself accountable sometimes, which can be really difficult, but making this investment can really be life-changing. It absolutely changed mine, and I so hope it can help change yours as well. There we are. I hope you found this video beneficial and that you feel more equipped to go out into the therapy world and start the healing and the thriving and the living and being the badass bitch like you know that you are. I feel that everybody can benefit from some type of therapy. I firmly don't believe that you need to be in crisis before you seek help. I like to think of therapy as a self-investment practice that I use to help support me through my lows, and also use as a tool to navigate the new version of myself that I find when the trauma lifts off and I don't quite recognise the person that I've become. I am a therapy stan, and I hope you will be too. If therapy is really financially inaccessible for you at the moment, or you're on really long waiting lists, I hear you. I'll do a future video on ways to manage your mental health when therapy isn't an option for you, so if that sounds like something you could benefit from, if you're feeling really nice, make sure to click the subscribe button and keep an eye out for that. My therapist is actually on a break now for a few months for the first time since I started therapy, so I will be trying lots of these out for myself and I will report back to you. And if you think you might have ADHD, or you do have ADHD like me, I think you will find this video quite useful. Thank you for being here, stay sexy as always, and I will see you in the next video. Mwah.